What are the main issues that are helping to decide your vote this election? Basim, starting with you.
The first thing that, of course, we share with everyone else is health and education, obviously. Like any other person who lives in Australia, education is a big priority, and health. However, there's a deeper issue. I think this election is quite unique because it came after the pandemic. And we saw that last year during the lockdown in New South Wales and specifically in Western Sydney, we saw the segregation and the unfortunate language that was used. And that brought a very important point if you reflect on it, and that's the lack of diversity in our leadership. Because a lot of the communities that live in Western Sydney felt they were disengaged, they were used as a scapegoat, and that's something that has happened in the past as well. But this time it brought it more to the surface, because before it was kind of blaming the community, Arabic-speaking community or Muslim community or so on. But this time it has nothing to do with religion or color or anything. It's a pandemic that affects everyone. Yet we see the same elements of the same language was used. And that shows, first of all, lack of diversity in our leadership as a nation that does not reflect our actual population at the moment. Something in the 40% of our nation were actually born overseas, but we still don't see that in our leadership. So that's possibly one of the biggest issues we have with this election.
Yeah, can I just jump on that one? Because actually over a quarter of the Australian population are from a non-European, Anglo-European background. However, only 4% of our federal members are from a non-Anglo-European background. I guess our community are keen to see our parliament actually looks like the Australian society. As for myself, I work for a community organisation which works in Sydney Southwest, so I represent the diverse communities there, and we support thousands of disadvantaged members of our communities every year. So our community has told us that employment is a big issue for them, so being able to access or get support to find long-term, meaningful employment that are commensurate to their skills and qualifications is something that a main barrier for them to face. And also, the mental health, access to health, education, housing are some of the main issues they're concerned about as well.
Do you feel as though there are issues that are particularly relevant to your community, or do you feel as though these policy areas are relevant to everyone, that they're just Australian issues? What do you think about that, April?
Well, I agree those issues are across the board for all Australians, because the programs I manage support predominantly newly arrived and recently arrived migrants and refugees. I would say the challenges they face are very unique to their circumstances. Some of them are structural barriers, such as speaking as employment, being able to have their qualification recognized here. The qualification recognition system is very complex and costly. And being able to have their transferable skills recognized and given an opportunity by local employer as well. So those are some of the challenges they face. How many of your viewers would have jumped into a cab and had a chat with the driver and find out they were engineers or accountants from overseas, but they can't find a professional job here, and therefore they have to resort to the first available low-skill or unskilled job they have to get by. So those are some of the very unique challenges migrants and refugees are facing.
Yeah, I'd like to jump on that. I'm a general manager of a health organization, and we operate in Southwest Sydney. And one of the biggest issues we have is employment. At the moment, because of course the pandemic, we have less migration, so we have actually staff shortage. And that's something that all over the board, all businesses are facing, especially in healthcare and disability sector. And one of the biggest challenge we have is a lot of candidates, they come from overseas, they're fresh here, they might be overqualified for the job. So we actually have some people who have PhDs who apply to be a support worker, for aged care or NDIS purpose or that. It's very common. Yet, even in that, it's very difficult for them to actively be engaged and to be employed. And the reason behind that we do not have really at the moment a sustainable program of making sure that these people are looked after in a way where they can secure employment in Australian context. A lot of employers, us included, we actually need Australian experience because our system is quite unique. The NDIS is quite unique. Aged care is quite unique. So when they come, they still don't understand the Australian system. So how can we work and create resources for them to enable them to get the employment? So sometimes we put the blame on employers. I think the blame is, I'm not trying to put the blame here, but the system overall doesn't actually give the opportunity for these people to be employed where they actually have the skills.
Yeah, for the migrants who have come here with skill and qualifications, like you mentioned, the system doesn't support a smooth transition to bring the overseas qualifications and skills into the Australian system. They often have to start all over, which again is costly and takes a long time, and people sort of get lost in the middle of it. In my opinion, some sort of flexible bridging programs needs to be put in place across a number of industries to support these people to actually have that smooth transition. And it's helpful for business employers and Australian economy as a whole. How many skills we've lost with these migrants, stacking shelves, driving cabs in our productivity in the economy.
When you look at what's happened over the last 3 years, we've had bushfires and floods and the pandemic, of course. When you look at Australia's future, do you feel optimistic?
Very optimistic. I strongly believe the new generations of Australians understand diversity more. If you go to school, if you go to uni, you see a lot of people that when you look at the parliament and you look at your own MPs, you don't see that diversity, and 100% change is going to happen. It's just that unfortunately at the moment we don't have the leadership to have the political will to lead that change. And I'm talking about both sides of politics. We do not have that leadership at the moment, but I strongly believe either we're going to have the leadership and one of the major parties comes on board and actually shows a great leader like how we had in Australian history, great leaders who made actual change, or the change will force itself upon everyone. It's as simple as that. So I'm very optimistic.
What about you?
Speaking of that younger generation, can I also jump in and say I am also optimistic. We run a lot of youth program and build young leaders as well. And we just recently were working with a couple of newly arrived Afghan young athletes who's very keen to represent their community and get their community issues out there. And one of them, we helped them apply for New South Wales' Youth Advisory Council, and he has been accepted. So very exciting news for himself and for ourselves. So we are already working with government to try and advocate the voice for our communities. And I am also optimistic as long as governments have the view to continue to hear from our community and address those issues they face. Yes.
April, Basim, thank you so much for speaking with me.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.